Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime series with Kevin, where we add value to people's lives, happening every day at 12 on ebizradio.com. Joining me today for the Lunchtime Careers segment, we have a dynamic lady who's been part of the Sage Global HR leadership team representing Africa, Middle East, Asia, and Australia region. She has more than 20 years experience in corporate and has led multinational teams through transition and change management. In her career, she's also worked as a payroll and HR consultant and consulting business managers and managed their internal training function where they established their HR department and was the HR director when they won the Deloitte Best Company to Work for 3 consecutive years. So please welcome talent strategist, leadership expert, executive coach, Anja van Beek. Hey, Anja, how you doing?
Hi, Kevin. I'm doing lovely. Thank you for that beautiful intro. It's a mouthful, hey?
Yeah, it's a nice big intro and such beautiful experience and input that people are going to be exposed to. So I'm really excited about chatting. But first off, tell us who you are. Give us a bit of the load. I mean, I've given some of it now, but tell us more about who you are and more about Anja.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And once again, thank you for the invitation just to share some ideas with you in the audience today. So it's really a pleasure to be here. So I think me in a nutshell, I would say my superpower is helping leaders create that environment where people can thrive. And I think why I say it's a superpower because it really starts with yourself. And over the years, I've been on a journey where on the one side, I was fortunate to be the HR director in a very, very dynamic and successful team. And I have been exposed to the ups and the downs of being in one of those high-profile roles. And then there was a part in my career where I said, this is enough, no more red tape. And I started my own coaching and consulting business. And that's now about 4 years ago. So if you ask me about myself, I'm a proud mom of 4 young, what shall I call them? Because they're not teenagers anymore, but 4 young, let's call them students. And yeah, married, living in, believe it or not, the house that I grew up in here in Pretoria, and planning to retire somewhere in Cape Town soon. Or perhaps not soon, but in the near future.
I love that. So Tanya, don't you want to tell us more about your journey, Anja? So, and the reason why you are doing what you're doing today.
Yeah. So I think if I think of my journey, the one word that comes to mind is, I would say, human-centric, humans. Because, I mean, if you're in HR, a lot of the people think of HR as a tick box function, a function that is just giving you forms and to-do lists. And they underestimate the value of connecting that human with, I would say, the purpose of the organization and providing value to the end customer. So if I look at my journey in my career, it has really been around how do you use technology to add value? How do you develop and grow the individual in the role to add value? But for me, it's really about who's the human that we're facing in that interaction and how can we make them shine? Because I think the more we have teams that feel empowered, the more we're working with teams that's very clear on what's the outcome that we want to achieve, the more they feel that they can make their own decisions and they can add value, the better the result in the end. So I think we definitely, especially over the last few months, what has happened globally with the pandemic, we have seen how it was almost the immediate switch to focusing from profit into let's balance that profit with what does the humans in the organization need in order to remain successful and to add value. So yeah, I would say that's in a nutshell my journey. Perhaps just to mention what was quite interesting when I left corporate, and I first of all thought I'm going to be a housewife. Now I'm going to be a mom of these many kids that we have. And that was nice for a while. And then there was a point in time where I said, but you know what, this is not it. How can I reach a bigger audience? And that's when I've completed my coaching qualification. And for me, that was almost a personal journey of really connecting with what is it that I want to do here on earth? What is it really? What's the value? What's that gift that I have? And how can I share that? So that for me was quite a personal journey. And I think where the magic happens for me is supporting my clients that's in their HR director role or whatever role they might be. Perhaps it's just a mom with a busy household as well, because I can relate with those things. I've been there, I've done that. I know what it takes. I know what it feels like where you have a sick child and you have deadlines work-wise. And how do you keep all those balls in the air?
Yeah, I always think being especially being a mom, I think dads sometimes have an easier role, but being a mom, I think that's like being a parent is probably like the most important job that we have in the world today. So, and having some insights around being a corporate person and yet still being able to be a parent. And how to get that right is such a challenge and it's such a balancing act, right? And but I mean, don't you want to give us an idea of because we've had a bit of conversation around what we could possibly delve into, but I want it to come from your brain and how you put that together. So don't you want to just preface this conversation and say, well, these are some key points that you sort of want to bring to our attention?
Yeah. Okay. So I think when I think of what I would like to bring over to the listeners today is really to understand how we all can benefit by understanding what an agile mindset is all about, especially the people in leadership roles or in the HR department, to understand how we sometimes, without even realizing it, being a bottleneck in that flow of value to our customers. So perhaps touch a little bit about what's Agile HR and what does Agile leadership look like. And I think then lastly, perhaps to touch on what you've just said, Kevin, is really understanding why is resilience so important and how can we build high-performing teams. So perhaps it's that balance between working from home and virtually and connecting with people, but it's all about, in the end, it's all about being high performing, having that balance where you feel it's not only work, but that you actually have time for yourself and your family or whatever is important for you as an individual.
Fantastic. So, I mean, to kick it off with the first question, what is Agile HR and what is the link to be more adaptive? What is this about?
Yeah. So I think sometimes I hate using the word agile because I think in certain circles it's actually a swear word because I think it's an overused concept or word. But I think it's important for us to remember that where it all started many, many years ago, I think in 2001, it was really in the software development function where a group of developers sat down and say, but you know what? There needs to be a better way of developing software. And why they said that is usually when you think of software development or in the older days, it was getting a spec and then the developers would go to a corner and almost seclude themselves and sit there and they code. And then after how many months, let's say 3, 4, 6 months, come back and show you what they've developed. And what they've realized at that time, the need has changed and what the client request has changed and everything around them, the environment might have changed. And they then decided on, okay, but let's do this differently. And Agile, that's why whenever I have workshops around Agile, I explain to the people, it's not the tools that you use. It's not if you're doing daily stand-ups and if you're using Scrum and if you're using a Kanban board. It's really about having that mindset based on values and certain principles. So to give you an example, one of the values is responding to change over following a plan. And I mean, we all can see that having that value is critical, especially if you think,
Anja, sorry to interrupt you, but please say that again, because I think it's so profound. Like that statement, like if you hear that and solidly understand the importance of that, please say that again.
So the words was responding to change over following a plan.
Yes.
Because I think, Kevin, we so often spend months and months or hours and hours on building that perfect plan. And the future is so uncertain. And it's more about let's define what's that outcome that we want to achieve. And then we adapt and adjust as necessary. So that's, for example, one of the values. Yeah. Another one that I just love is about the individuals and interaction. So face-to-face interaction where possible is more important than the processes and the tools that you use. And again, I think that one is so profound to understand that it's the collaboration with the team, the collaboration with the customer is more important than whatever you've agreed in the contract. Not that those things are important. It's just the other side, I think, is a little bit better to focus on because that's what we need to be adaptive. And I think that's why I just love these concepts.
Yeah, I love that, because I think you also hear about certain organizations kind of going, people are struggling. I think there's a term used for it now. I stand to be corrected, but they speak of Zoom burnout. Yeah, because like that whole sense of I don't want to be on another screen for 5 minutes. I just cannot handle it anymore. And it's almost like as humans, we're craving a bit of engagement and real interaction.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I have seen two things recently, and perhaps some of the people are already doing that. But the one I think lovely practice is having a no Zoom meeting or no virtual meeting day. So lots of companies saying Fridays, there's no virtual meetings. You can just, spend time working or whatever you need to do. I love that. Perhaps it's not a day. Perhaps it's only an afternoon. And what you say is so critical for humans to connect, because even though I can see you and I can see the expressions, there's a little bit of that face-to-face connections that is just lost in the virtual world. Yeah, but that's unfortunate. We need to work around that. But the Zoom fatigue, very real. Yeah.
And also, just to point that out, why do you think that is still a conversation we have, right? Is it a case of us really having to get to the dire straits before people actually really go, yeah, actually, I need to do something about it? Is it a case of leaders throwing up their hands in the air and kind of going, well, we don't know what to do. We're not sure. We know we know about, because connection and connecting with people it's not a new thing, as coaches, as consultants, as parents, we know the importance of connection, cultivating a relationship and cultivating an essence between two people. It's never got, it's not a new kind of theme that's running around. I think it's, it's just strange that I speak to so many people in powerful positions and connection, trust, empathy, these concepts that we hear about, they almost still seem foreign and outside of us. And yet we're going, no, actually, what does it need to take for us to really get that connection, empathy, trust, all these human values that we have is so important.
Yeah. So I think there's many ways that we can answer that specific question. But I think what comes to mind first and foremost is that, again, as humans, our brains are wired and we do what we're comfortable with. And if you have a look at the traditional way of leading and managing people, they might be set in a specific way and it worked for them for whatever reason. And I think it's for leaders and individuals to understand, but that the future needs something different. We can continue on that path, but you know what? You will unfortunately be outshined by another company soon. Because for me, it's if leaders don't get that they need a different approach, and they really, as you say, things like trust, things like, let's have a look at the purpose of the organization. And until they really understand that, that's why I believe that leadership development starts with personal development. And a team can only transform to the extent that the leader is willing to transform. Because, again, there's so many points that I can mention. Firstly, are you really in tune with who's sitting in front of you? Because if I have a team of 9 people, I need to understand that each one of them are motivated in a different way, and they have different values and priorities. And now, how do I get that and really form a team that we can have a high-performing team? So that's on the one side. And then on the other side, I also think it's the responsibility of the team members to speak up. It's not only the leader. Yes, the leader definitely has a role and a responsibility, but if you as a team member or individual contributor not really getting, or you have an idea, it's your responsibility to speak up and share that.
I love that, and I don't know who made the statement, but the statement or the quote where someone said, the quality of your questions determine the quality of that conversation, right? And it's not just because the leaders are in a position to lead. It doesn't mean, and to that point you mentioned, leadership starts with me, right? So, for me to be able to make any kind of changes, or me to even have this kind of conversation, even as an employee, I still too need to be able to speak to my manager or my boss in any terms and kind of go, I need to have a conversation with you, and it might be a difficult conversation, but I think we need to talk about this. And it's really relevant. I think the onus of how we change anything and the capacity to and degree to what we do it doesn't just fall on the person in a position. It's sort of a holistic kind of approach that we really need to take. But I mean, to that point, in your experience, like this agile HR kind of approach, and our approach to this being adaptive to turbulent times.
Yeah.
Why do you think this is really so important in the fast-paced times that we're living in?
Yeah, I think that the simple answer to that one would be is that if we can create what I call a learning organization, that would be the ideal, because a learning organization simply means that when the people that can adjust, experiment, and learn the quickest, they're the best. Because, I mean, if you just take, none of us know what the next 6 months might, bring to us. There might be a third wave, or there might be a different pandemic, or there might be a crash on the stock exchange. We don't know. But when we have the capacity, not ourselves, but our teams, to adjust and try things and shift as necessary and learn from that, that's the successful organization. And that's why whenever I think of a learning organization, Amy Edmondson spoke about the psychological safety. That comes to mind. Building that psychological safe environment where employees feel, to use your words, seen, respected, trusted, and that they feel that I can speak up. Because if you think of people learning and people being innovative, we want them to be innovative and we want them to think out of the box. But then how do we as leaders act when there was a mistake, or when there was perhaps something that did not work out? Because that's the crucial moment to determine if they will experiment and learn again. And I think that's almost the paradigm shift between, instead of having a day where you give recognition to whatever, achievement they have, or if you think of financial targets we have achieved, why not have a day where we share our learnings and our mistakes with one another, and almost make that normal? To say, you know what, this is the lesson that I've learned yesterday or last week, or this is the mistake I made, or you know what, even just saying, I'm sorry, I actually don't know, what do you guys think? And really be open to hear what the team says. So, yeah.
And it comes to mind where, like, an experience that I've also recently had, and I coined it as, eagerly anticipating the uncertainty about a moment. You know, if we can eagerly anticipate that the uncertainty that comes up from what's lying ahead in the next 12 months, right? And create those spaces for people to kind of go, well, this is what I learned. This is what I didn't expect. This is what didn't work. This is what I've learned from the massive failure I experienced. And just like that safety and that environment that's, you know, holds the space for people to be able to be okay and be human, because inevitably that's our business, right? Our business are made up of people, and yet we, you know, we sometimes go through a tick box exercise and we try and, you know, formulate the plan. But as you say, you know, like being at the forefront of change and just kind of going, well, how what's agile, and I know you don't like the word agile. Adaptive. There we go. Like, you know, how adaptive are we to this change and the environment? And do we create like a learned or an environment of learned, agile, adaptive approaches all the time? Because that is the future of where leadership and corporate and business is, right? And also you also mentioned if you're not doing it, you can bet your bottom dollar that my competitor or someone else is about to do it, or is already doing it, right? And if we're not really in the forefront of being that kind of or having that kind of approach, we get pushed to the bottom of the pile. Which leads me to the one of the terms you've got here, and I'm sure this is alluding to that, is corporate athlete.
Yeah.
Tell me more. Like, what is a corporate athlete?
Okay, so a corporate athlete I define as someone that is high performing, reaching those goals, and they actually know how to get the job done. But when I think of the corporate athlete, it's also being high performer to understand what's the flip side of the coin, because it's unreasonable to think and expect of yourself to just, you know, be going like this the whole time. If you think of any athlete, I mean, they have their peaks, but then they have their rest and recovery periods as well. And if I just listen to what's happening in the industry, and some of my network, you know, where they're still in corporate permanent roles, they have been working longer and harder even before the pandemic. So now it's virtually. That's the challenge. They might be homeschooling. That's a challenge. It might be that, whatever the challenge you want to bring up. And it's almost as if we underestimate that rest and recovery. It's almost as if busyness, you know, is like glamorous, and the more busy you are, and people need to understand the impact of, yes, you can do that for a few months, but eventually it will catch up with you. And I think we need to understand the power of rituals for individuals, but also for teams, to almost rest and recover.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, you know, and, you know, being in the position you've been in and the position you hold with that experience, it's almost like we as a society, as the world moving into, you know, 2021, the 21st century, busyness has become the thing that we like you mentioned, glamorize, and we make it the most important thing, right? And we forget that for us to be at our peak, there has to be an obvious rest and recover period. There has to be that balance, right? And that part of the work-life balance that we often hear about and speak about and actively aim to achieve. But I think more now than ever, you know, it really speaks to having like an active consciousness around, well, what am I doing? How am I putting this in my diary? And I'm really working hard. And then where am I actually allocating downtime? When am I allocating stop working time or holiday time or whatever that is? I think it's incredibly important.
So perhaps I can just share, because I thought that was excellent. So some of my ex-colleagues at Sage told me that they now have something that's called, I think it's called mental wellness days, where the company actually give them days. It's not annual leave, it's not family responsibility leave, but I think it's 3 days, I don't know the number, for mental wellness. And they can do whatever they need to do to build their mental capacity. And how amazing is that, to think of allocating specific time and encouraging the people to take care of their mental health.
Yeah, you know, it's one of the strategies I've used actually in training that I've done before, is specifically around resilience, which is something we're going to touch on today. Is you know, people go, yeah, they've got their diaries out, and they've got every other hour allocated to it, and then I pull up my diary and I go, okay, cool, guys, check my diary and see these areas here colored in green. I'm like, these are rest and time out for me, for just where I will allocate an hour or 20 minutes or whatever I see available in my week to kind of go, okay, don't work, just go and sit in the sun, or just go outside and go for a walk, or just go and sit and doodle on my social media and just kind of like interrupt my brain completely, doing random and that interruption of flow in my day kind of just gives you a bit of recharge, and then you kind of get back to, oh yes, that I need to remember to do that. And you know, so it's I think it's a fantastic thing. But I mean, to the point that we have here is resilience, right? So how can we build, and how can individuals and teams build resilience? Because I mean, that's a simple strategy, but like, what would the advice be?
Yeah. So I think, Kevin, you have touched on so many of those points already, but perhaps let's start with, what does resilience mean? Because a lot of the time people think that resilience is something where you bounce back, and it's about your grit and your tenacity that you have. And in my mind, resilience is a little bit more than that. Yes, it is the ability to bounce back, but it's also the ability to learn and grow from the experience in order to handle it differently. So in my mind, I would say resilience is about that, bouncing back and learning. Let's perhaps just keep it as that. And again, the word curious, the word learning comes into play here. And what you were saying about, I love what you're doing with your diary, just that blocks of, it doesn't even have to be 20 minutes. It can literally be 5 minutes. But what do you do to really silence the mind for a few minutes a day? I mean, I was facilitating the other day, and I love the spaced learning. I love the virtual environment with the learning specifically, because it's not 2 days back to back. It is spread out a little bit. And that workshop was run 5 mornings. And on day 4, I thought, let me, with my check-in today, just ask the people, what are your stress levels? If you think of being, even in the virtual classroom, out of 10. And majority of them said, you know what, it's 8, 9, or 10 out of 10. Now, that for me is quite high, quite a stressful. And now you want to teach them, or they want to learn certain things. And it's for them to understand that if you don't silence your mind, you just don't have that capacity to learn or problem solve, or even focus on the complex issues. Or if you do that, the energy it takes for you to just do that simple task of solving a problem or thinking out of the box or whatever that might be. And I think that for them was a big aha, to realize that, and it wasn't even a workshop on resilience, but just that small point of, yes, it's stressful, but stress needs to be like any rhythm. I mean, there's ups and downs. It's not necessarily bad. But if you constantly on that 7, 8, 9, or 10, you need to change your habits. You need to create something different. And that we can do as a team. Now, I laugh, because if you have ever asked me, Anja, would you say this out loud? I would have said no. But I mean, it can be simple as start the meeting with some mindful breathing and just silence the mind. I mean, how easy is that? A few minutes before the meeting start, especially now virtually, put off the webcams. We're not looking at one another, and that's a way of silencing the mind. Why? Because then we know you have the capacity, the brain capacity, to really think out of the box when we need to brainstorm or whatever it is that we want to do in that meeting.
I love that. And I think, you know, I also do a lot of research around neuroscience. It's something I've always been passionate about. And there's a neuroscientist called Dr. Andrew Huberman. And he speaks about the importance of really getting your brain on board with why stress is. We instinctively speak about stress, and I think this probably comes from the 80s already. You know, from if you're too stressed out, and stress can be such a negative thing, and absolutely over a period of time, and to what level it's sort of functioning, it can be. But stress in itself is there to be an indicator for you to take action. You know, and that's how he explains it. And I was like, that is such a profound way of thinking about it, because you're kind of going, okay, yeah, I'm feeling a little bit stressed. What does that mean, right? And when you kind of get on board and are actively involved with what is happening in your world the whole time, part of your brain also gets to a point where you're going, okay, cool, I'm noticing this as a pattern, you know, and that's why, you know, for me, it's, you know, like allocating time in my diary, because instinctively I get like busy, and you kind of go, okay, well, you need to do this. And I, you know, 3 days in, I'm going, okay, cool. Let me allocate more days here, or let me allocate more little 5 minutes and 20 minutes to myself, purely based on the fact that, knowing that, you know, stress is a good thing. But to the point where I'm burning out and level 8, 9, and 10, you know, that's not useful.
Yeah. And Kevin, sorry to interrupt you there, but something that comes to mind remember you asked the question earlier is, why don't leaders get that? And I think perhaps sometimes just getting or becoming more aware of things like what you've just mentioned, because we spoke about psychological safety, but if you then think of the social safety and that belonging, so if they can just get it, that people want to belong, and the safe is not the right word, but if they feel they can make a meaningful contribution, they would be more resilient and they would be more high performing. And I think it's sometimes just getting that awareness as a leader as well. Some research, Kevin, you spoke about the neuroscience that I saw that I think is fascinating was Dr. Etienne van der Walt and his team at Neurozone did some research over the pandemic. And what they found, for me, it was fascinating how your negative thought pattern and your destructive habits, the impact that is having on your resilience. And a lot of the time for people just to understand that something like gratitude, optimism, or even humor, how that can support teams to become, you know, more resilient. So we were talking about that mindful breathing. But if you're not there yet, perhaps just ask the team, what are you grateful for? Just list 3 things that you're grateful for today. Again, that will help you build the resilience. So there's so many different things that they can do.
There is, just to add to that as well, I think, you know, I've recently shared this with a client, is your reticular activation system. So there's something called your RAS. You know, the more you focus on something, the more your brain finds supporting evidence to prove that it's real. And I think that's also the link that people miss around gratitude and breathing, right? You kind of go, oh my goodness, like, why am I sitting here breathing? Or why am I now writing out this list of things I'm grateful for? It's purely based on the fact that your brain is literally seeking more information to support the fact that I'm focused on this thing that I'm focused on. And if you're just simply focused on the stress or the outcome and the deadline, your brain's just there doing that, right? You're not actually getting to a point where you're also doing a bit of brain gym and kind of going, no, actually, let me get my brain focused on a little bit of something else more than just that, right? Yeah. And that's what gratitude does. You know, it's not simply having this feel-good schwa moment in my head and I'm like, oh, I'm like part of the earth. It's, you know, it's that for some people, but it's more than that. You know, it's there's actual science to prove why your brain starts finding different things to relate to and exercise. And because of that, like you're saying, you know, it really does start affecting your resilience, because then you're kind of going, well, how do I bounce back? How do I start getting my brain? And also in terms of stress levels, and I think Anthony Robbins, you know, specifically points out, your brain can't reach for a feel-good moment when you are consumed by stress and fear, or stress and a difficult moment. You can't simply just hop into, oh, I'm happy, let me do happy now, right? Your brain's now stuck there, right? And it part of your brain needs to be kind of on board with this other thing you're about to do. So from a neuroscience perspective, it's very difficult for you just to hop around from space to space. You mentioned, creating a learning environment, like how conducive, how safe, how trusted, how all of these things that are human qualities, do I find myself in an environment for me to be able to even learn anything, right? And if I'm stressed out, I'm not going to be learning anything, which doesn't help me with my own resilience and bouncing back to even do the next 6 months, right? So, I mean, all of them and all of the stuff you're mentioning, I think they're all, like if we actually examine it and you kind of go, it's so linked together, it's so mushed up, if we just started paying attention to it.
No, definitely. And I think another big blind spot that I have seen, and that's now back to the whole agile mindset, and specifically thinking of HR teams, is where perfect is our blind spot, because we want things to be perfect before we roll out the new performance management or the leadership development, whatever. And I think that for me was a big aha personally, and some of the clients that I'm working with is, does not need to be perfect. It just needs to be good enough. And then you tweak from there.
Yeah, and it's almost like embrace the failure, right? Embrace the fact that you possibly and probably will get it wrong in the first 4, 5, 6 times, but you'll start honing it, and that's the beauty of the journey of the process, right? Yeah. And being part of that journey, I think. Yeah. If you could give us sort of a summary and takeaway of today's conversation and leave us with some really great tips on, what are some of the considerations that we need to do out there as leaders in an HR environment for our corporates, for our teams. What could be five of the obvious things that we can start doing today?
Yeah, so I would say, so I would reflect on the following. So first of all, let's really understand, or let's agree that the future demands a different approach. So if you want to continue with the old path, not going to work. So what is the new recipe? I almost want to say there's no recipe. I would say go back and have a look at what are the values that you believe is critical, or what are the principles that you believe is critical. For example, that, adjust to change over following a plan, just as an example. And it's really about experimenting and learning. So if we say then experimenting and learning, for you as a leader to be mindful, how does your behavior actually then not only demonstrate that, but how intentional are you about creating that environment where other people can fail? Because if we then say a learning organization is what we want to cultivate, learning goes with, as you said, embrace the failure, or and how do you create that environment where people embrace the failure? I also think that a lot of the times, I think leaders are conditioned to think that they need to come up with the solutions. That's gone are those days. So it's really about inviting and including your teams with co-creating with you. You will find that they have a lot more better ideas than yourself. And as we know, that diverse ideas, in the end, we will get to a different, even better solution. And I almost want to say, be mindful of the human sitting in front of you, be it a client, be it a colleague, be it a wife, partner, kid, and just be present and think what they need to shine. Because I think for us, if you as an individual can build I almost want to say a reputation where people that when they interact with you feel that they are better afterwards. I think, yeah, that might be the magic.
I love that. And I think it's the kind of reputation you'd like to have, right? You're kind of going, wow, if I did have your reputation, what would it be? Right. And That would be like the perfect kind of consideration to have. Anja, this has been such a fantastic conversation. Thank you for being here, and thank you for making the time to chat to us.
Yeah, and Kevin, I want to say thank you for creating this platform. I know that it's not always easy. It's very time consuming. Thank you for the invite. It was really lovely to connect with you today.
Thank you. It is. It's been an absolute pleasure. If anybody wants to get hold of you, what's the website? What's the links?
Okay, so that's quite easy. www.anjavanbeek.co.za, or my email, hello, HELLO, hello@anjavanbeek.co.za. Looking forward to connecting with them.
Fantastic, guys. And as per usual, all the information will be shared in the links in the Dropbox below. Please join us every other Tuesday and Wednesday for Lunchtime Careers segment happening right here on eBiz Radio at 12 every weekday. Thank you so much, Anja. Have a wonderful day, and I will chat to you soon.
Thanks, Kevin. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Anja.